Translator, Reverie, Editor, Kurisu evil demon trees were creatures most uncanny. Poised between flora and feral beast, like beasts, they could condense an inner core akin to a martial cultivator's dantian. This was the wellspring of their might, named the tree heart. Since they were half plant by nature, an evil demon tree's tree heart resembled spirit grasses, easily refined, and thus all the more precious. Ling Han hounded them without giving an inch, striking until the evil demon tree host fell into chaos. In the end, 7 evil demon trees had their tree hearts forcibly gouged out, while the rest seized the opening and fled, vanishing without even a shadow left behind. Yet because they were half plant, even with their tree hearts removed, they would not die. Given 1,000 years, the tree heart would slowly grow back again. 7 tree hearts ought to be enough to help him break through to the second layer of the gushing spring tier. Yes? Ling Han's curiosity also rose. When he reached the peak of the first layer of the gushing spring tier, would a second spring eye take shape? Or would the first spring eye continue to broaden? He was in no hurry to refine those tree hearts. Instead, he pressed onward. Each time the mystery realm opened, it could remain open only about 2 months. He had already spent roughly half that span, so he had to quicken his steps. Fortunately, he possessed a predecessor's logbook, and thus skirted several perilous restrictions along the way, facing threats yet never truly falling into danger. The deeper he went, the more level the terrain became. Before, there had been rolling mountain ridges. Here there was only flat land spreading seemingly without end. Far away, a black radiance shot straight into the heavens, linking to the firmament like a pillar that reached the sky. At its summit, a pitch-black layer of clouds circled and coiled. Within that swirl, a tiny dot could be faintly made out, yet what it was remained a mystery, for it was simply too distant to discern. That black light's location should be the core of the mystery realm. What secrets precisely lay hidden there? Ling Han had not even set out again when he heard a strange scraping sound and saw 3 bronze caskets sliding toward him from afar. That eerie sound came from the caskets grinding against the ground. The caskets halted 10 meters before Ling Han. Peng, the lid of one casket flew open and out sprang a youth. It was Ronghuan Xuan. "You're quite strange, kid. I'm surprised you were able to come here," Ronghuan Xuan said, his expression both puzzled and impressed. You too! You too!" Ling Han smiled as he spoke. If Ronghuan Xuan did not bring out the silver-armored corpse, then there would be room to trade blows. "You had a breakthrough?" Ronghuan Xuan's gaze swept across Ling Han without meaning to, and in an instant his jaw dropped wide enough to swallow a chicken egg. "You were only at the first layer of the element gathering tier earlier. How did you suddenly become someone at the first layer of the gushing spring tier?" This was utterly beyond belief. Whose cultivation could leap like that? "Right, you must have eaten some spirit fruit. That's why your cultivation jumped." He nodded at once, answering his own question. It was the only reasonable explanation. Ling Han naturally offered no explanation. He said, "You can come here because of the 3 caskets, right?" Ronghuan Xuan had ridden over on the casket earlier. This was the 1,000 Corp Sect's most precious treasure, perhaps even a 10th tier spirit tool, since it could fend off the restriction. Ronghuan Xuan smiled with pride and said, "Correct." Then he asked, "So how did you come over?" "Luck," Ling Han smiled. "Then your luck is truly bad." Ronghuan Xuan let a sliver of killing intent leak out. "Why?" "Because you're going to die by my hands now." Ronghuan Xuan lunged, curling his right hand into a fist. A wave of foul, filthy aura poured from his body, turning the ground within 30 meters into dead land. Corpse chi surged unceasingly, congealing into skulls that rushed at Ling Han. "Humph. Evil triumphs, not over the virtuous." Ling Han snorted, and with a thought, flames spilled forth from his body, resisting the corpse land. His spirit base was complete in the 5 elements. Origin power could transform into any element, and conjuring fire was naturally a trifling matter. Moreover, flames bore powerful restraint against evil chi. This clash was a direct contest of origin power. Ronghuan Xuan was at the 5th layer of the gushing spring tier, yet his strength unexpectedly surpassed Ling Han's. A 5th layer overpowering a 1st layer should have been the most ordinary thing. However, Ling Han's spirit base encompassed 5 elements, and atop the fusion of 9 nuclei into one, His might already exceeded that of an ordinary fifth layer. This meant Rong Huanshuan was no common fellow. His power surpassed his cultivation. Ling Han could not help but shake his head. He was surely a genius, but were other geniuses forbidden to exist? Though the Thousand Corpse sect was hunted like rats, it could not be denied that it once enjoyed years of glory. Its roots were naturally deep. How could it fail to produce one or two extraordinary geniuses? Ling Han was somewhat surprised, but Rong Huanshuan was even more shaken. Rong Huanshuan knew clearly that though he stood at the fifth layer of the Gushing Spring tier, his true power matched the seventh layer, and his battle prowess soared to 9 stars. Yet in a pure origin power stalemate, he only barely surpassed Ling Han. Truly inconceivable. You're very strange. You may become a great rival in the future, so you must die. Rong Huanshuan declared as if speaking righteous law. Ling Han laughed and said, "Hearing that, should I feel honored or scared?" "Honored and scared," Rong Huanshuan replied with menace. "You seem to understand quite a bit about the Thousand Corpse sect. You were probably thinking I could run wild only by relying on these corpse soldiers, but you didn't know my own strength is also extremely strong." "Then I shall experience it," Ling Han answered indifferently. "You will regret it." Rong Huanshuan attacked. His fist transformed into a massive skull that smashed toward Ling Han as he chanted, "Corpse chi opens the skies. My lord is heaven and earth." This chant is quite conceited, but this strength, well... Ling Han shook his head, his eyes turning cold. His right hand was already striking out with his sword as he said, "On a clear bright day, demons and devils scatter at once." Swordlight burst forth like the noon sun, scattering brilliance in all directions. "Not bad. You have some strength." Rong Huanshuan sneered, still hurling punch after punch wrapped in corpse chi, unafraid to clash head-on with a sharp blade. The main reason was that this sword was still an ordinary weapon. If it were a third-tier spirit tool, Rong Huanshuan would certainly not dare be so arrogant. He possessed the advantage in power, and it was an absolute advantage. Moreover, his techniques were also anything but ordinary. Very quickly, he seized the initiative, each punch more overbearing than the last. "I knew I didn't misjudge you. Your battle power is extremely strong, at least equivalent to 8 stars. Unfortunately, you met me." He laughed loudly, his spirit arrogant and domineering. This man was certainly a genius, and he had inherited the Thousand Corpse sect's legacy. It was impossible for him not to be formidable. Ling Han let out a ringing shout and produced the fire-eyed bull's horns, gripping one in each hand. With a surge of origin power, the patterns on the horns immediately lit one after another, each erupting with flame. "Watch how I'm going to slice you." Ling Han used the horns as a hilt and the flames as a blade, striking at Rong Huanshuan as though wielding a sword. The effect was unexpectedly excellent. Rong Huanshuan cultivated an art of utmost yin and evil, and what he feared and loathed most were fire-type methods that naturally suppressed his. As the flames whirled, his force was instantly diminished greatly, and the two became evenly matched. "You shall not live." Rong Huanshuan's killing intent now blazed like a furnace. Translator, Dark Angel. Editor, Kurisu. Rong Huanshuan was, without a doubt, a man swollen with arrogance. He was a genius among martial cultivators. Of that there could be no questioning. Moreover, he had even seized the core inheritance of the Thousand Corpse sect. So, within the same generation, he ought to have stood peerless and invincible. Yet Ling Han was younger than he, and still possessed strength enough to contend against him head-on. This made the intent to kill surge and seethe within Rong Huanshuan like boiling pitch. "Die!" He invoked a clandestine art and drove a punch forth. In that instant, a pale shadow of a black skull appeared, draped over armor of the same abyssal hue. A gigantic black blade rose up and cleaved toward Ling Han in one ruthless arc. Ling Han's expression tightened with caution. He drew a deep breath, lifted the bull's horns, and launched his own slash. Mysterious 3000. Shua, shua, shua. In but a heartbeat, the skull warrior formed by that technique suffered slash after slash, and under the storm of blade light, it shattered into fragments on the spot. Ling Han's breathing turned a shade heavy. If not for the space within his dantian, having been expanded 100-fold, he would have been utterly drained after forcing out 10+ strikes of mysterious 3000 at most. This sword style was indeed tyrannically powerful. yet it consumed an unusually colossal amount of energy. Furthermore, the bull's horns were still not a true sword at the end of the day, so there was an undeniable loss in destructive might. Yet it was precisely because the bull's horns could kindle a level 3 flame, exceptionally effective at dispersing corpse chi, that he could accomplish his purpose with this single exchange. Ronghuan Xuan stared in complete disbelief. That move just now had been a secret technique of the Thousand Corpse sect, a black-grade high-level technique. It was also something only a disciple of the Thousand Corpse sect could employ, because it required the user to possess corpse chi. This strike fused origin power with corpse chi, carrying a terrifying corrosive might. A martial artist needed only brush against a trace of it, and he would melt away entirely. Yet Ling Han had unexpectedly unraveled it with a single slash. If Ronghuan Xuan had known this was the invincible sword technique that had allowed the Sword Emperor to roam the world unimpeded, he might even have felt a sliver of honor, for the Sword Emperor was far too monstrous a figure. He had risen to fame when he was merely in the Gushing Spring tier, all the way until he reached the Heaven tier. At each cultivation level, he defeated every opponent of the same realm and stood unrivaled atop the martial world. To face such a slash and still avoid death or defeat, this was already a miracle beyond miracles, yet Ronghuan Xuan did not know. Thus, resentment swelled within him, and his killing intent grew sharper still. You truly are a formidable foe. I have no choice but to eradicate you. Ling Han sighed, then smiled as he spoke. There is no enmity between us, so why not simply drink some wine or have some tea? It would be better for you to go to hell and have your drink there. Ronghuan Xuan roared, and black qi rose over his entire body. A bizarre scene unfolded. The black qi actually condensed, hardening into sharp blades that covered him from head to toe. At a glance, it was as if he had transformed into some kind of fiendish monster. Ling Han's gaze turned even more vigilant, and he said, "You made corpse chi sheath your body and forcibly increased your own power? You truly have deep understanding of the Thousand Corpse sect." Ronghuan Xuan sneered and said, "Since that is the case, do you still intend to resist?" Ling Han smiled with calm composure and replied, "You have your trump card, but so do I. First, I did not wish to reveal it, and second, I did not wish to waste it on you." "Oh, then I would very much like to take a look." Ronghuan Xuan moved. With corpse chi enveloping him, his battle prowess had indeed surged drastically, and once again he seized the upper hand. Ling Han gave a cold hum and donned the purple star handguard. He had already fully grasped the method of using this spirit tool. The moment he poured origin power into it, the patterns upon it flared with light and supplied him with a continuous stream of energy. "Yi?" Ronghuan Xuan cried out in surprise. His battle prowess had risen, yet Ling Han had likewise increased his own, so both sides were again returned to the same starting line. It seemed this brat had also encountered a colossal fated opportunity of his own. However, Ronghuan Xuan felt no fear. His greatest trump card was the 3 copper coffins. This was a secret treasure of the Thousand Corpse sect. Though he was still unable to fully activate them, so long as he took shelter within, even a powerful elite of the flower blossoming tier might not be able to pry open the coffin lid and drag him out. Thus his confidence was overflowing. "Heng! Ada! Come out!" he muttered beneath his breath, and ping! Another coffin opened as a silver-armored corpse leaped out. "Hey, hey, hey! Didn't we agree on a one-on-one battle?" "How can you bring out a helper?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Since you know so many secrets of the Thousand Corpse sect, then you should also definitely know that the greatest technique of my sect is to control corpses. Corpse soldiers can be considered my sword or saber, so how could it be considered as taking the advantage of numbers to bully the few?" Ronghuan Xuan also smiled, yet without the slightest hesitation, he issued his order for the silver-armored corpse to attack Ling Han, a spiritual ocean tier. What more? The peak of the spiritual ocean tier was not a level Ling Han could oppose at this moment. Even if he had the Black Tower transmit power to him and forcibly raise his cultivation to the next tier, it was still not certain he could withstand such a terrifying existence. After all, the gap between the first and the 9th layer was far too vast. Moreover, the body of the silver-armored corpse was comparable to the materials used to forge a Tier 4 weapon. Even if it stood there without moving, it would still take Ling Han some effort to break through its defenses. Pang! Just as Ling Han was considering retreat, a black shadow suddenly dropped from above and crashed down heavily near them, blasting a gigantic depression into the earth and shaking the ground with a violent tremor. Ling Han and Ronghuan Xuan immediately halted their battle. They might desperately want to kill each other, yet neither would ever throw away his own life to achieve that end. Peng! Peng! More and more black shadows dropped from above. Like rain, they slammed down all around Ling Han and Ronghuan Xuan. Ling Han's mind turned wary and alert. If he were driven into truly desperate straits, then he could only enter the Black Tower in front of everyone. If worse came to worst, he could seize the moment when the Black Tower transmitted power into him and slaughter them, ensuring none survived to reveal his secret. His gaze swept across the surroundings, and he could not help but feel shock seize him. From the great depression in the ground, a hand actually stretched out, and a person crawled up from within. This was an old man clad in embroidered robes. He looked like a wealthy gentleman, yet there was not the slightest trace of life circulating anywhere in his body. No heartbeat, no breath. Ling Han was absolutely certain the blood within this man's veins was not flowing. This should have been a completely dead man, yet he climbed out of the deep pit, and his face was vivid and lively. No matter how one looked at it, he seemed merely to have fallen asleep. That instead was even more terrifying, and not only him. From each and every hole, a corpse crawled out. It was obvious there was no sign of life in them at all, and yet they still moved. They looked somewhat like corpse soldiers, yet they clearly had not been refined at all. What was even more inconceivable was this. These corpses had dropped down from the sky. Yet Ronghuan Xuan's eyes lit up at once, and he looked as if he might burst into dance. So many corpses of such excellent quality. No wonder the 3 live corpse coffins insisted on bringing me here. So it seems there is a great fated opportunity awaiting me here. This person was in the spiritual pedestal tier when alive. This one was in the flower blossoming tier. And here's another in the spiritual pedestal tier. Ha ha! I need only refine a few corpses and it will be enough for me to do as I please in the north. Ronghuan Xuan was beside himself with joy. He pointed at one of the corpses with his right hand and said, "When I refine you, you must obey my commands." He began muttering under his breath, and black chi spread from his right hand, drifting toward that corpse. The corpse appeared to feel nothing at all, merely continuing to stare blankly at the sky. Ling Han also raised his eyes to the heavens and could not help but form a daring thought. Could it be that these corpses were that little black dot in the sky? And before this, it had been impossible to tell there was more than one because of the distance. The black light coiled around the corpse's body, and as if alive, seeped into it through its nostrils, ears, and eyes. Ronghuan Xuan smiled. This was the source corpse chi he had cultivated. So long as a corpse was invaded by this chi, it would fall under his control. "Come here," he commanded. The corpse seemed to sense something amiss. It suddenly turned to look at Ronghuan Xuan, its body trembling slightly. Poo, a black-colored chi, shot out from within its body and instantly turned into ash. Ronghuan Xuan's previously pale face abruptly flushed red, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His source corpse chi had been destroyed, and he suffered a violent backlash as a result.